Hello everyone, this is Sonal Banerjee and in today's video we are going to deal with the first chapter of class 12 NCRT book, that is Brick, Reeds and Bones, the Harappan Civilization. The archaeologist, while excavation, found various types of artifacts which not only included tools, utensils or ornaments used during that time but also bricks, beads and bones. Seals were an important artifact which consists of inscriptions or writings which are unfortunately not yet deciphered. This stands as a limitation for the historians to reconstruct proper history of that time. In the first page of your chapter, you will find a picture of an Harappan seal which has some symbols at the top and an animal motif. The map in the second page shows the various sites of the Harappan civilization, which includes various sites like Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, Kodiji, Dholavira, etc. There are various other places. The Harappan civilization is also known as the Indus Valley civilization because most of the sites are located near the banks of the river Indus. But it is also known as the Harappan civilization because the first site to be discovered was Harappa. The historians have divided the Harappan civilization into two stages. The first, the early Harappan, and the second, the Harappan civilization. This was done because during the calculation of the time division of the various artifacts, historians found that some of the artifacts were more developed than the others. This indicated that the Harappan sites, some were more developed than the other Harappan sites. The Harappan seals with animal motifs also indicate that the people might have used these animals for their agriculture. Along with that, a terracotta model of a bull and a terracotta model of a plough were also found during the excavation. Evidences of ploughed fields at Kalibangan, present-day Rajasthan, indicates that the people of the Harappan civilization were into agriculture and they also developed their technologies. The ploughs had two sets of furrows, which means that they used to grow two types of crop at the same time. The places like Rajasthan, Afghanistan, Sindh, Punjab, Gujarat is arid region. Irrigation was an important means for agriculture. Traces of canals and water reservoirs are also found during the excavation of the Harappan civilization. Now, let's take a look at a well-planned and an important urban city of the Indus Valley civilization, that is Mohenjo-Daro. I am sure you must have all seen the movie Mohenjo-Daro. Yes, I also have seen. Now, let's see if we can connect some history from our books to that story or the film. The Mohenjo-Daro was a well-planned urban city which was divided into two parts, the citadel and the lower town. The citadel was a place or an area which was situated on a high-raised platform and was walled all round. It had walls all round. Not only that, the lower town also had walls. But the importance is that the citadel had important buildings like the great granary, the great bath, warehouse, etc. It is assumed by the historians that the rich people used to live in the citadel area. The lower town had houses for the common people. Houses in the citadel were built of bricks, either sun-dried or baked. The roads intersected each other at right angles, and it indicated that the people of the civilization had a good knowledge of calculation and mathematics. One of the most distinctive features of Harappan cities was the well-planned drainage system.
If you look at the plan of the lower town, you will notice that the roads and the streets were laid out along an approximate grid pattern. So as you can see here, considering that these are the roads, so we can see that the roads are placed in a grid pattern with roads intersecting each other at 90-degree angle. This gives us an idea that the people of the Harappan civilization might had the knowledge and the sense of calculation and mathematics. If we consider this road as the main road and the small lines as drains, we will find that the drains that were laid was never laid beside the main road. It was laid mainly on the smaller roads. If these are the houses, then we will see that the drains were connected to each houses. This shows us the well managed and the well planned town system of that time. It seems that the streets with drains were laid out first and then houses were built along them. If domestic wastewater had to flow into the street drains, every house needed to have at least one wall along the street. As we can see, these houses have at least one wall. They can have more than one wall along the streets, but they at least had one wall along the streets. So this is how the drainage system of the Harappan civilization looked like.
One of an important feature of the Indus Valley civilization or the urban cities is that the cities had well-planned drainage system which had drains running along the roads and were covered by bricks. If we look at the domestic architecture of the houses, we will find that there were no windows at the ground level. Even the main gate or the door did not show directly the interior or the courtyard of the house. They showed that the people of the civilization gave importance to privacy. While mentioning about the citadel, I had mentioned about Great Bath. Great Bath was an important building or a structure which was rectangular in shape, laid with bricks and had stairs on both ends. It had a long corridor with rooms which might have been used for as changing rooms as we find in modern day swimming pools. Evidences have led to the conclusion that this great bath might have been used for ceremonial bathings. In the movie Mohenjo-Daro, a glimpse of a structure quite resembling the structure of the great bath is found, where it is shown a ceremonial bathing taking place in a song.
Let's take a look at how the Great Bath looked. The Great Bath was a large rectangular tank in a courtyard surrounded by corridors on all four sides. So, if we consider this rectangle as the Great Bath, it had corridors on all the four sides. Okay, and there were two flights of steps on the north and the south leading into the tank. So let's take as these two as the steps, north and south. So these two are the steps that led to the water tank. These steps were usually built with bricks on the edges using a mortar of gypsum. There were also rooms on the sides, in one of which was a large well. Water from the tank flowed into a huge drain. So we can say that the rectangular tank, water tank, was surrounded by rooms, something of this kind, on all three sides. I have drawn on two sides, but it was on three sides, not four sides. So there was room on the three sides. These rooms also had drainage connection. Maybe these rooms had washrooms or toilets or bathrooms which were well connected with the drains that were laid. From that movie also, and also from the evidences that we get from our books, we can say that this great bath may have been used for ceremonial practices, and it was situated in the citadel. This was an important building, or you can say was an important structure in the times of the Harappan Civilization.
Let's move on to the next part, that is tracking the social differences. The historians have tried to figure out whether there were social differences among the people living in the civilization. It was difficult for the historians to reconstruct this part of history because, as we have known and read earlier, that the scripts that were found has not yet been deciphered. Hence, the historians had to construct it from whatever available resources and artifacts. During the excavation of the Harappan civilization, historians have come across burials where the bodies, or we can say the dead bodies of the people, were buried. There were some differences in the burials found. The burials were the pits or hollow land, which some had lined bricks. Maybe this could be an example of the existing social differences, but we are not sure about it. But we can say that the historians or the people living in that civilization believed in afterlife, because in the burials, along with the dead bodies, there were few objects found, like they had mirrors, luxury items which included mirrors, ornaments, oils, etc. There was also differences in these things that were given along with the dead body. Along with some dead bodies, the historians found many other objects of regular use, or we can say for users in daily life. But in some burials, there were nothing. This might have indicated that people who had higher order in the society usually gave things with the dead body as a mark of afterlife which they would require. But those who were unable to give such things usually buried the dead bodies without anything. Historians from this point of view has pointed that there might have been existence of social differences in the Indus Valley civilization. Another strategy to identify the social differences was to study the artifacts carefully, which the historians have divided into two: utilitarian and luxurious items. The utilitarian items usually included the ordinary things that were used during that time, like clay utensils and other things that they used in their regular day-to-day life. And the luxury items were those which were not easily found there and were made up of precious things like porcelain or stone-made utensils. Chanugaru is similar to Mohenjo-Daro site, but it is a smaller town or a site. You can locate Chanugaru in the given map number 1 of your textbook. This place was famous, or we can say that the people in this town or the site were usually into making of beads. They made beads of various kinds. They made beads from stones, metals, shells, etc. The technique of making beads differed according to the materials that was used for making the beads. The beads were made from stones like carnelian, gypsum, lapis lazuli, etc. From metals like copper, gold, silver, etc. They also were involved in shell cutting and making. All these things were usually used as ornaments or decorative pieces. If you notice map 1, you will see that the two places, Nageshwar and Balakot, were coastal regions. They were specialized in shell cutting. These places were specialized in making various kinds of objects from shells, which included bangles and many other ornaments. For identifying the places of production, the archaeologists usually gave importance to the fact where the raw materials could have been easily found. In fact, rejected and waste materials are the best indicator of craft. That the people who used to make or who were into the craft production used to gather raw materials from various places. As we have discussed, from the places like Nageshwar and Balakot, they could easily find shells, whereas from Shortgull they could find the blue colored stone or lapis lazuli. Lothal was a source of carnelian which were used for making beads. Similarly, various metals were also found from Rajasthan. Recent historians have pointed out that the Harappan civilization may have connections with the other parts of the world, as copper from Oman was found in this civilization. Chemical analysis have shown that the Omanian copper and the Harappan artifacts both had traces of nickel, which suggested a common origin. Seals and sealings facilitated long-distance communication. For example, if a bag of goods was to be sent from Harappa to somewhere else, they would usually tie it and put wet clay and then seal it with seals, one or many. This would indicate that the bag would reach there and they would identify if the bag was open in the middle of the journey. In the beginning of the video, we have discussed about seals. We know how a seal looked. It had some animal or some different motif at the below and had some inscriptions or writings at the top. Since these inscriptions have not yet been deciphered, we lack a major part of the history of the civilization. Apart from these seals were also used for long distance communication, or the Harappan civilization used to communicate with other parts of the world with the use of these seals. We also find weights. I hope you all know about weights. When you go to a market, you can see that, for example, if you are buying vegetables, the vegetable vendor would take his balance and would keep some stones on one side and would keep some vegetables that you want to buy on the other side. So how would he measure? If you want, for example, if you want 1 kg potato, how would he measure that the number of potatoes are 1 kg or not? He puts some weights on one scale and on the other he puts the potatoes. So these weights, they are numbered as 1 kg, 500 grams, etc. So that it is easier for the vendor and also for the consumer to buy the correct weight of the items. So not only now, this concept of weights was also used previously. We find instances that in the Harappan civilization, the people used weights. Like in nowadays, we have a center of power, that is the government, which helps us to maintain law and order in the society. There are no archaeological evidence which would point to the fact of the center of power, whether it existed in the civilization or not. The archaeologists have labeled a big structure or a building in Mohenjo-Daro as the palace, and similarly also a structure of a person is known as the priest king, because the archaeologists or the historians had a picture of the Mesopotamian priest kings. Some historians thought that there was no ruler and that each and everybody in the civilization enjoyed equal status. But on the other hand, some historians are of the opinion that the Indus Valley civilization did not just have a single ruler, but it had several rulers who ruled their towns or the sites independently. So far what we have discussed are the facts and features of the Harappan civilization in the context of how the archaeologists and the historians have reconstructed the history of the civilization from the material remains that were found during the excavation. However, there is another story about how the archaeologists discovered this civilization. When the Harappan cities fell into ruins, people gradually forgot about them. But when, after many years later, the people came back and started living in the same area, they came across few artifacts gradually due to floods, soil erosions, or while plowing the fields or digging up lands for treasures. They came up with these objects of the previous civilization. Similar seals from Mohenjo-Daro was also discovered by Rakhal Das Banerjee. The seals found from Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were quite similar, which indicated the archaeologists that both the sites were from the same archaeological culture. Based on these findings, in 1924, John Marshall, the Director General of ASI, that is Archaeological Survey of India, announced to the world about the new civilization in the Indus Valley that was named as the Indus Valley Civilization or the Harappan Civilization. Archaeologists faced various problems in interpretation. The first and the foremost reason was that the script was unknown to them. The scripts or the written literature acts as the most important source of history, but the historians had nothing to do but to reconstruct the history from whatever material resources or artifacts they had got during the excavations. The things or the objects that were quite unfamiliar or were unknown to the historians or the archaeologists were classified with some religious significance because there is hardly any evidence of the religious or the customs that existed in the Harappan civilization. Attempts have been made to reconstruct the religious beliefs and practices by examining the seals that the archaeologists have found. Let us take an example of the Proto-Shiva seal. In the seal, we find a human figure sitting in an yogic posture, which is considered to be as Rudra, and hence the historians have named the seal as Proto-Shiva seal. So, to conclude, we can say that the Harappan civilization or the Indus Valley civilization has many more parts or sites which are yet to be explored. If we succeed in deciphering the scripts of the Harappan civilization, I am sure we are going to find lots and lots of evidences which would help us in reconstructing the history of the civilization. In this video, we have discussed about the Harappan civilization, the main features and the characteristics of this civilization, and also along with it, we have also discussed how the civilization was discovered or explored by the archaeologists of the Archaeological Survey of India.